I don't think I need to explain what analog horror is. Chances are, even if you're completely uninterested in horror media, you've heard the term being tossed around at least a couple of times because it's the 2020's equivalent of calling something a creepypasta. It's an almost infamous internet horror fad that gets attached to every single scary YouTube video released post-2018. But, just to clear things up, when I'm talking about analog horror, I'm talking about a genre of horror fiction that utilizes cryptic narratives, found footage influences, VHS era visuals, and most importantly, spooky distorted faces. So imagine an even more cursed looking Germa face projected onto a CRT TV screen with some old ass lo-fi elevator music from the 80s playing and some infomercial looking text message saying some random shit like the owls are not what they seem, and bam, that's analog horror for you. Right now, don't get it twisted, I love analog horror. I find that style extremely captivating since I'm like one of the last remaining 27 people on Earth who still give a damn about found footage aesthetic and all the adjacent stuff. However, at the same time, it is really fucking easy to make fun of it. And to prove to all 12 of you who watch this shit that I do, in fact, find analog horror interesting, here's me going through some notable analog horror series in order of appearances in this here overview video, because originality is dead and I'm bored. Now, although I am a fan of it, at this point there are just so many goddamn analog horror series out there. Plus, I have other stuff to do in my life, so I am aware that I'm gonna be excluding some series out of this discussion, just because I'm either unaware or unable to watch everything that gets recommended or released under this goddamn umbrella term. Now, once again, the onus of reminding me of what I missed is on the 12... Wait, that number probably fell off. Okay, all of you my 8 remaining loyal viewers, it's up to you to remind me of all the shit that I missed. Plus, the title says series, as in YouTube series, even if they include only one video. Therefore, don't expect stuff like the Archive 81 podcast, the Skinamarink movie, or even the Vanishing of SS Willy, which came out on its own website, I believe. And speaking of stuff that y'all ought not to expect, Marble Hornets and all of their clones. I know they're very important for internet horror, but I think they better fit in their own category of Slenderverse ARGs. Also, here there be mature themes and spoilers. Consider thyself warned. Right now. Now, the origins of analog horror go way, way back. Some even citing stuff like the Blair Witch Project as the actual originator of the style. However, in terms of YouTube series, the one that's often cited as the first analog horror series, in retrospect, is No Through Road. No Through Road started off as a single video uploaded way back when in January of 2009, but later on it was expanded into a 4-part series, after like 2.5 years. The series revolves around footage recorded and eventually recovered from a group of British teens who were found dead at an abandoned farm in the British countryside. I'll stop with the British thing. The footage shows them taking a shortcut through a dead end or a no-through road, which leads them into a time loop and an encounter with a man wearing a bunny mask who promptly kills all of them. Later in the series, it's revealed that while their car and bodies were discovered along with the footage, the teens are actually still trapped inside the time loop with the masked man. It's pretty short overall, and you'll notice the obvious influences from the Blair Witch Project and the Bunny Man urban legend. Now, No Through Road doesn't have much in common with analog horror as we know it today. It predates the coining of the term and the coining of genres conventions by almost a whole decade, and it has more in common with the straightforward found footage genre. It does contain some analog horror elements that weren't being used by other more contemporary internet horror series, such as liminal aesthetics, cryptic plot, and implied government interference. I mean, what was it? At the time, all you had from like YouTube horror was stuff like Lonely Girl 15, and this is a far cry from Lonely Girl 15. The series even predates Marble Hornets by a couple of months, so yeah, you can imagine how big No Through Road was. That was a joke, it wasn't big. It got completely overshadowed by Marble Hornets and all those, other series that followed in their wake. But it did retain a cult fan base, which over the years, and especially in later years, only grew with the proliferation of, analog horror. Although the series got retroactively slapped with the label of, it's considered one of the foundational works of analog horror as well, but I don't see it being often cited as the actual first one. It's more of a proto-analog horror series, if you will. Now, moving on to what is, in my personal opinion, the actual first proper analog horror series, and that's Local 58. Local 58 was made by Chris Straub, who is the author of Candle Cove, which is like one of the only two good lost media creepypastas out there, and it also takes place in the same universe as Candle Cove, which I'm gonna call the Straubverse, if you will. I'm kinda stretching the definition here because the series was originally uploaded on its own website, but it did go over on YouTube on Halloween of 2017 with a rearranged order of videos, so fuck it. While the series is kinda all over the place story-wise because it wasn't initially made with a singular plot in mind, it was just kind of a pet project of Chris's. General outline of the plot revolves around a public access TV channel called Local 58. Yeah, I know, it's shocking. The station signal often gets hijacked, and when it's not being subjected to Max Headroom's unannounced sequel episodes, the station itself sometimes broadcasts some weird, questionable stuff. The most coherent plot line that I can see is the one that revolves around the moon, which is, in the series, a living Lovecraftian entity that feeds on people through just spreading of fear and despair, and possibly through nightmares as well. And once again, the US government knows about it, so get comfortable with the whole higher-up conspiracy thing. It'll come back a lot. This series is ground zero for almost the entirety of the analog horror aesthetic. Everything that came after it can be traced back to Local 58. This is the, how do I put it? If No Through Road was possessed, this would be Death. There's like two people who understand that reference, never mind. But, I mean, from the way Local 58 is presented, from the way it's shot, the way they use text on screen, the use of faux, new or informational graphics, choice of audio mixing, lack of jump scares, everything. Even the term analog horror actually comes from Local 58. That's where it comes from. So the mishmash of the early episodes aside, this is still a fantastic series with a solid premise that basically kicked off this whole thing. And by that I of course mean the myriad of knockoff series which immediately copied everything Local 58 did to a T, right down to the whole hijacked public TV thing. I mean, okay, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so by that logic, Chris should be redder than all of your ex's red flags by now. Well, here we are, the first actual analog horror series that started right here on YouTube. And much like other analog horror OGs, CHSS is less of a codified analog horror trope series and more of its own weird experimental thing, kinda. Which in this case is a, how do I put it, it's a supernatural Cold War thriller inspired by MKUltra and the SCP Foundation. Bear with me. The story revolves around the eponymous CHSS company, which, with the backing of the US government, starts running psychological surveys in 1986 with the supposed intent on providing better mental health treatments. Yeah, sure thing, Uncle Sam. Well, as it turns out, the program was in fact all about surveillance, you guessed it, as it was an attempt to locate and neutralize a strange supernatural Soviet creature that was created back in the 50s, which also masquerades as a deer-headed hallucination thing. Yeah, I know I already mentioned a hungry Lovecraftian moon, and I'll also be mentioning some other outlandish plot stuff later on in the video, but this premise always stuck out to me as just a bit whack. Just a little bit. The series incorporates elements of espionage thrillers, sci-fi horror, real-life psychological experiments, and most importantly, ARGs, mainly due to its reliance on the use of ancillary materials for understanding the plot. And yeah, SCP mixed with MKUltra is definitely the right description of CHSS. Plus, as one of the earlier progenitors of the analog horror style, it's still rooted in the more established internet horror tropes of the time, especially the ARG. ARGs were really popular in the early 2010s. Everyone wanted to do the next big Marble Hornets thing, and in this case you can see that influence with the reliance on the Twitter accounts and media file links that are in the descriptions of some of the videos. In most other analog horror series, the ones that came later, those will be kind of relegated to hosting some additional narrative material that isn't all that important to keep in mind in order to properly understand the series. But in the case of CHSS, they're kind of obligatory. And yeah, it's all things considered a big undertaking. Did I mention that Turkulainen 3, the author of the series, was 15 when he made all of this? Which, I mean, that's a lot of stuff. Props just for sheer effort, my man. And while CHSS is, in my opinion, still a noteworthy and solid horror series, I was personally never really a big fan of it. I like slow burns and I like my sci-fi weird horror, but CHSS really takes its time plodding along. But there is one thing, because come to think of it, I don't think we ever get explained what CHSS stands for, unless it's another clue that is yet to be sold because no one looked for it. God damn it. And here's this video's closest brush with Marble Hornets. I know I wasn't gonna mention them, but yeah, whatever. So after Marble Hornets ended in 2014, Troy Wagner, who was the creator of the series, started a new internet horror project called Clear Lakes 44. Clear Lakes 44 was gonna be a spin-off continuation of Marble Hornets, set in the same universe. There were actually a lot of CL44 Easter eggs in Marble Hornets itself, kind of like, to pre-establish the IP, I guess. However, due to some behind-the-scenes creative issues, Clear Lakes 44 was abandoned after about a year. Yeah, bummer. But not too long after, I think 6 months, Troy rebooted the series under the new name of ECKVA. The series doesn't have much to do with the, tall, faceless hitman-looking ass Tim Boy around this time, so in this case, ECKVA follows a dude named S. Hawkins, as he investigates mysterious transmissions that can only be picked up at his old abandoned house through this wonky jury-rigged setup that involves an old portable CRT TV and a laptop. Soon thereafter, he becomes known to the person broadcasting these transmissions, a guy who is essentially the antagonist of this series, called Broadcaster. Yeah, I gotta say, as far as interesting antagonists' names go, this is a big step down from the Operator. Anyway, the Broadcaster then starts to target S. Hawkins himself, and the feces start impacting the ventilator on all fronts. And by that I mean outside of YouTube as well, because yes, this is also an ARG with heavy reliance on additional material on Twitter and their own proprietary website. Why? So you can solve clues and follow along the story. Look, the guy made Marble Hornets. I don't know, what did you expect? Now, ECKVA never made as much of a splash as Marble Hornets did, but it wasn't as panned as Clear Lakes 44 was, so that's something. Plus, it came out right as the first wave of analog horror series was slowly rolling out as well, and it does have some similarities to them, but it also has the ARG elements that were still rooted in that older YouTube horror approach, which is the one that Marble Hornets helped popularize. Even though ECKVA actually goes harder into that whole clue solving through external websites aspect. So if you like that sort of thing, plus cryptic, glitchy, 2D arc-like video editing, yeah, ECKVA is the series for you. However, I should point out, do you know what wasn't brought over to ECKVA from Marble Hornets? A definitive ending. Troy mentioned that the 18th video in the series, fittingly titled ECKVA 18, was the final video of ECKVA's Part 1, implying we're gonna get some more seasons out of this thing. However, at the time of me writing and recording this, more than 4 years has passed since the ending of Part 1, and there have been a couple of additional videos posted since, including ECKVA 19, which I assume was meant to be the beginning of Part 2. That post was years ago, however, and from what I've gathered, Troy hasn't given up on the series or said much of anything. He's just most likely preoccupied with, life stuff. Right now, he's a father, so you can't just, run around the woods with a camera all willy-nilly if you have a kid to take care of. Still, even if we do get more ECKVA, I assume it's gonna be a little while before that happens, maybe even years. But it's not like the Part 1 has nothing interesting to offer, so there's that. Remember when I said that Local 58 spawned a bunch of channels that were just, Local 58 ripoffs? Yeah, there were a shit ton of them, like Aleph Null Network, Broadcast 64, WLCB TV, there's a CBT in there, Jesus. Whatever else that was that I and everyone else had forgot about. And if you ask me, you need not worry about any one of them. They're all a product of that one short moment in time, and they haven't held up as much as Local 58 has. One exception I can think of, however, is Channel 7. Channel 7 was started by Aidan Sheik in 2018, and it mostly follows the pre-established analog horror formula, The channel in question is a public TV broadcaster based in Pennsylvania that operated between 50s and 80s, occasionally showing some spooky stuff, the kind of stuff you can expect from Local 58 ripoff. The series is actually a part of a larger horror project called the Tempest Films universe, with Channel 7 also being connected to The Interloper, which is a short film and a creature in the aforementioned universe. And that's gonna be about as much as I want to say regarding the general premise of Channel 7, and it's for two big reasons. The first one, kinda obvious. Channel 7 started the trend of copying Local 58's horror approach There are even some videos in the series that can be considered almost shot-for-shot ripoffs, and chances are, unless you really want to see some more stuff in the vein of Local 58, you can probably skip this series without worrying too much that you'll be missing something special. And that's not really such a bad thing either when you consider that the second reason why I'm not going to talk about this in further detail is Aiden scrapped Channel 7. Once the series was done in 2019, he had stated that the events depicted in it are no longer considered canon to the wider Tempest Films universe. But the Interloper short movie is still canon, however. Now, that wasn't the end of it, actually, as he had also announced that there will be a new analog horror series coming out as a canon successor to Channel 7. So that's gonna be our next subject. As promised, we got a new analog horror series from Aiden, also set in the Tempest Films universe. This one is called Analog Archives. And unlike Channel 7, Analog Archives is an anthology series this time around that follows 3 interconnected stories that span several decades and several counties in several states. Although it's a step up from his work on Channel 7, some of you might be disappointed to learn that, well, at least partially, we're gonna be sticking with the public access TV format channel this time around as well. But what also doesn't help, or at least in my opinion doesn't help, is that the entries are not posted in the chronological order as the events unfolded, which would make Christopher Nolan proud and probably cream his pants. That non-linear episode posting is something that was a carryover from Channel 7, but thankfully the bloated storytelling was left behind, because the series is half as long as Channel 7, but it manages to tell 3 times the amount of interesting stories, so that's something. And Aiden seemed to learn a lot over a short period of time when it comes to serialized storytelling. Analog Archives' first episode was released 5 months after the previous project of Aiden's, Channel 7, which I have mentioned like 17 trillion times by now, ended. That's when most of the Local 58 clones came out, and since you didn't need to put massive amounts of effort to make some TV news graphics and apply the analog filter on them. However, this is also when things started shifting a little bit. While it was made under heavy influence of Local 58, you can also spot some narrative elements that are more akin to those seen in something like CHSS, like infomercials for Mads and ARG elements in the form of an accompanying Twitter account. It also started delving away from adhering to that strict public access TV format into stuff that will only become more and more pronounced with time as the analog horror series roll out, including instructional VHS tapes, security recordings, found footage segments. At this point, the medium of analog horror started shifting from its aforementioned strict adherence to the Local 58 formula to basically just being whatever, internet horror with VHS filter on it. And if I can use a first-person shooter analogy to explain, I would say that you can imagine Local 58 as Doom, and then you can imagine Analog Archives kinda like Half-Life, or maybe Marathon would be a better comparison. Actually, Analog Archives doesn't have any psychotically cryptic lore, so I guess Half-Life fits it better. I was tempted to delve deeper into the stories of Channel 7 and Analog Archives, but since they are a part of the Tempest Films universe, that would take more time than I'd like to allocate into this video, so maybe I'll do a Tempest Films video in the near future. Who knows? Of fucking course, this series attaches itself to whatever is in its reach, its lore growing more and more needlessly verbose and dense with every grab. And that's gonna be the main reason why I'm gonna try to keep this one brief. Not only because I personally hate Five Nights at Freddy's, but also because I don't entirely understand how much of this is relevant or irrelevant to the established canon, and that canon itself is really convoluted and large, so yeah. Also, there isn't just one FNaF VHS series, there are at least 6 of them. Christ almighty. So, talking about FNaF VHS to me is kind of like diving headfirst into the Mariana Trench completely naked. At the least, what I can do is I can talk about the one that kind of kicked it off, which is the Squimpus McGrimpus series. Yes, that is his actual username. That was one of the sentences I ever spoke. In this series, the main character is Michael Afton, the son of William Afton, who is apparently the guy who killed all those kids back in the 80s and stuffed the animatronics with their corpses. I don't know, I just read that from a wiki. Michael is trying to deal with the corporate cover-up situation and discover what happened to his brother and his father. And spoiler alert, they're both dead, except his dad isn't entirely dead. His soul is just trapped in an animatronic suit after he was trapped and killed inside of it. And his brother's soul is also trapped inside another animatronic suit. I bet this probably makes more sense to you if you've played the games or seen some of these plot breakdown videos. I'm just... whatever. Unlike previously discussed analog series, however, there is a heavy reliance on CGI this time around, which makes sense. The animatronics are the stars of the show, without a doubt. The series wouldn't work if it was confined to just stills and infographics. And plus, all the awkward, rigid movements of the animatronic dolls look even better and creepier when you apply the VHS filter. And you know, come to think of it, this was the first big intentional analog horror series that broke away from the tradition of, you know, previous analog horror slideshows and went full in on the CGI. And it also focused more on individual characters and their arcs. And I gotta say, even if I don't like Five Nights at Freddy's at all, some of those videos do manage to bring out the spooks, especially the ones that are concerning the fact that all of the kids that got killed and stuffed in those suits, well, pretty much everyone who got killed and stuffed, are still aware of what is going on. They're essentially stuck in an animatronic purgatory. And pseudo-coma will never not be terrifying to me, no matter how much Metallica tries. And while Squimpus' series had its definitive finale and is over, along with some of the others from the aforementioned 6, the greater series is, as far as I can tell, still ongoing. Just don't expect Squimpus to come back anytime soon. He seems busy grooming minors. Fuck. If I had a cent for every YouTuber who turned out to be a predator, I wouldn't have to worry about my car payments for the next 20 millennia. Swear to God. I've mentioned SCP Foundation, which is a collaborative internet horror anthology project about a fictional organization cataloging paranormal and supernatural occurrences encountered by mankind. And someone once described the concept as a homegrown internet X-Files, which, yeah, it's a fairly accurate description. And while we never got a full-blown SCP Foundation analog horror series, we did kinda get the next best thing, which is the Minerva Alliance. Starting in 2019, the Minerva Alliance continued the trend of slowly moving away from Local 58's approach to analog horror and into the territory that, honestly, even to this day, is kinda unappreciated, which is the territory of collaborative analog horror anthologies. The project was started by Quarks and Rec, along with some other people, and it's pretty much what its channel description says. It's a non-profit organization tasked with reporting anomalous activities for the general safety of mankind. Paraphrased. Most of those threats are of psychic and or supernatural variety, but we do get some EAS videos and strange creatures thrown in for good measure. The series' most notable videos, however, are the ones portraying to the audio logs of Tommy Parsons, a backpacker who went missing in the Appalachian Mountains, and it kind of reminds me of that infamous Japanese SOS audio tape incident from like the late 80s. The Minerva Alliance isn't really discussed all that often when the conversation about transitional analog horror series comes up. Sometimes a good thing falls through the cracks, you know, even though probably Minerva deserved a better fate. And although it isn't exactly the greatest of series, I think Minerva Alliance is good enough that it didn't deserve to be kind of forgotten. Although considering what was coming out of the time, you know, we'll see. It's not all that surprising that it kind of fell off by the wayside. Analog horror anthologies are not that common in the first place. Collaborative analog horror series are even more rare. But you know what was almost unheard of in analog horror at this point? I mean literally unheard? Voice acting. I mean sure, audio logs have been a tried and true method of relying spooks ever since System Shock first used them back in the early 90s, but they're seldom seen in analog horror. It's easier to make some VHS era graphics and spookify them instead of, you know, trying to convey emotions convincingly through voice acting. And yet, Tommy Parsons' audio diaries pull that off pretty darn good. I mean, there are some few rough spots here and there, but for the most part, really fucking solid voice acting. Unfortunately, the Minerva Alliance itself didn't last too long. After about 14 videos in 2 years, the activity just seems to have stopped without any explanation. Now, I tried to look up what happened. I tried to check Reddit, tried to check Twitter and whatever, you know, that wretched hive of mental illness, but there's been absolutely no word. And it's a shame, honestly, but the people involved are working on other projects as far as I know, so that's something at least. I think we can make a clear line of demarcation between the early analog horror stuff and what genre is today. And in my opinion, at least, that line was definitively drawn with the release of Gemini Home Entertainment. Gemini Home Entertainment mixes previously established analog audiovisual presentation and narrative tropes with some outright unsettling body and cosmic horror. The series is presented as a VHS collection produced by the eponymous Gemini Home Entertainment Company, usually being of educational and/or commercial nature. The videos themselves are also produced by other in-universe companies such as Regnat Computing, Harbage Technologies, and Optica Video. And yes, all of those names have deeper meanings, of course. Through these videos, we learn of the existence of an impending extraterrestrial threat bent on consuming, well, not just all life on Earth, but probably the Earth itself. And that threat takes the form of a sentient planet called the Iris, which also throughout the course of the series is sending out parasitic life forms from its surface and underbells to prepare the Earth and mankind as a whole for the consumption. The main series ended in 2021. However, additional material is still being posted on the main channel, not really all that frequently, but it is. And there is even an official Gemini Home Entertainment game out there called Lethal Omen, which is pretty fun. And while they're not necessary if you want to further understand the plot of the series, the ancillary videos in the video game do a neat job of expanding the universe of Gemini Home Entertainment and all the related events. And now, full disclosure, straight out of the way, this is my favorite analog horror series. I am a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and Gemini Home Entertainment, in a way, feels like something that could have been written by Lovecraft. I don't think that Remy Abode, who's the creator of the series, ever said this, but there are elements of the story here that feel heavily inspired by stories like The Whisperer in Darkness. Other influences to GHE, such as The Thing and The Endless, are present and a bit more overt. Remy's got good taste in horror. Now, at the time, the most other analog horror series presented their videos in, Local 58 sort of thing. They weren't strangers to ARG elements as well, and they were mostly about some supernatural creatures, kind of like Slenderman. So going with some direct cosmic horror without spreading out clues all over Twitter and Reddit definitely helped Remy's series stand out at the time, and I think it still stands out as one of the best. But that's mainly because the execution is so damn good. Now, granted, it does start off a bit formulaic, a bit slow, and there are even some conspiracies present from the higher-ups to add to the story. Not a negative commentary at all, but for the further along the series goes, overall the quality, well, in my biased opinion, just keeps growing and growing, culminating with Crusader Probe Mission, which is the final main episode and one of my favorite pieces of internet horror media ever, which really sells the scale and the totality of what the mankind in the series is facing. It's basically an insurmountable terror creeping ever closer, and there's nothing we can do about it. And the ending of that video and the series is just, it's perfect. I fucking love it. Yeah, I know this was incredibly biased of me, but hey, what can I say? It's just my opinion, and Gemini Home Entertainment is absolutely amazing. And if the point of this video was for me to give out recommends, then yeah, this is getting a glowing recommend. Aidan Sheik is a great iterator. He took the established analog horror tropes, added his own anthological elements, and over time he got better with the execution of the idea, which all culminated in, at the time of this recording, his last original analog horror series, Eventide Media Center, which is an anthology analog horror series that revolves around informational video archive of the public library in the town of, yeah, you guessed it, Eventide Valley, Massachusetts, which is run by the Eventide Media Group, in universe, naturally. Start taking shots every time I say Eventide. Each video takes place somewhere either in Eventide Valley or in one of the surrounding towns within the state of Massachusetts. The videos in the series usually depict unnatural, unusual, and anomalous events that range quite a lot. We got, impossible structures that are just chilling in the middle of nowhere. Then there are nuclear holocaust PSAs that make threads look optimistic of all fucking things. CGI sequences that remind me that the square root of 906.01 equals 30.1. It all seemed harmless. Please make it stop. PTSD. And we got some wacky shit like ratful subterranean creatures that hate city council meetings. Yeah, and a bunch of persuasive arguments for taking off and nuking Eventide Valley from orbit, just to make sure. There is just so much weird shit. You'd think that Eventide Valley is located somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, but as it turns out, Twin Peaks lied to me, and Alan Wake, and Gravity Falls. Thankfully, Twilight lied as well. Anyway, besides sharing the general location, the videos are really not connected in any significant way because each of them tells a self-contained short horror story. And the videos range from, the typical TV broadcasts, informative VHS tapes, CCTV recordings, public service announcements, stuff like that. But they are grouped in, seasons, which in the Eventide Media Center are called libraries, because we gotta differentiate this shit somehow. And they kind of need that because they often get compared to Gemini Home Entertainment, mainly because both are centered around media companies that are producing educational videos that regard weird and horrific shit happening all over the place, and they both kind of came out at the same time. But in reality, Eventide is a lot closer to Analog Archives, which was Aiden's previous project. He was already shifting into that instructional VHS area of analog horror on the Analog Archives, so yeah. And unlike Gemini, there's no big overarching story, so if anything, think of Eventide more as Gemini's episodic stepbrother from another mother. No, not that kind of stepbrother. Jesus fucking Christ, you go touch grass. The series was just, chulling along into the beginning of Library 2, and then it came to an abrupt end. You see, one of the first videos in Library 2 was titled Crimson Creek, and it kind of ended up to the entire series basically being cancelled due to the fact that the plot of the video involves a malevolent creature just tearing through a community college, killing a bunch of people, and then in universe that event gets covered up as a school shooting. Aiden promptly apologized after a supposed negative backlash on fucking Twitter of all places, because of course he then deleted the video and the entirety of the YouTube channel and all of the other videos. And that escalated quickly, especially because from what I've managed to gather, the overwhelming negative backlash, in quotes, seems to just be a couple of people getting up on arms on Twitter, which is just a fucking Tuesday there. And it's not like he just threw that whole school shooting aspect for cheap shock value. No, it was used as an actual cover story for an equally gruesome event that happens in the Eventide Media Center universe. And it's only shown on the screen for like 4 seconds. They don't linger on it at all. Point being, I don't think it was as offensive or offensive at all. He shouldn't have deleted the channel originally just because of that. So where does this leave us standing? Well, after 2022, when the channel was deleted, the fans took the matters into their own hands, kept the series going on their own for a little while. They made basically a bunch of fan videos and re-uploaded all of Aiden's deleted videos. And that was the new status quo, I guess, up until 2025, when suddenly and unexpectedly, somehow, Aiden returned and resurrected EMC for one video only, I guess. That video being Solemn Regression, and it was uploaded on the series' 5th anniversary. However, it turns out that in the meantime, everyone thought that Aiden just went radio silent, went off the grid, didn't do anything regarding analog horror, but no. As it turns out, that whole entire time he was working as one of the team members behind Midwest Angelica, which, yes, I will be talking about that one later on because it's pretty fucking awesome. In the meantime, the fan channel, which currently is titled Eventide Restoration Agency, there were a bunch of renames, don't worry about it, that fan channel still exists. And now they've gone radio silent after Aiden's return, because they also had some of their own internal reshuffling and drama. It's a whole thing, dude. It's a whole thing. But either way, whatever you slice it and dice it, there's still a bunch of unlisted videos from both Eventide Media Center and Restoration Agency. And with Aiden's intent on making Solemn Regression the finale of the series, I'm pretty confident in saying that the whole Eventide thing is over. I've mentioned my dislike for Five Nights at Freddy's. It's too convoluted and kiddie-ish for my liking, always has been, and probably always will be. Almost everything that came out of that franchise to me is just really unappealing. Almost everything. The Walten Files is an analog horror series created by Martin Walls back in 2020. The centerpiece of the series is Bob's Burgers. No, that's Bob's Burgers, you're thinking of. Wrong restaurant. Bob's Burgers, in Walten Files, is a fictional restaurant founded by Jack Walten and his buddy Felix Kranken, who also were the founders of Bunny Smiles Incorporated, or BSI for short. The gimmick of the restaurant was that it hosted Showstoppers, a live animatronic band fronted by an animatronic bunny called Bon Appetit. As you might expect, both the restaurant and the company went defunct in the 80s under mysterious circumstances, and Jack Walten also disappeared along with the rest of his family. The series investigates the nefarious goings-on in the restaurant and the company through BSI's instructional videos, assorted found footage stuff, and hidden videos with cryptic messages. You might have surmised by now that the Walten Files are heavily inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's. In fact, the idea for the series developed from Martin's two previous unfinished FNaF fan games. And besides Five Nights at Freddy's, Martin also cited Local 58 as an inspiration, which, given the lack of episodes where something spooky happens during a TV broadcast, that makes him one of the most original iterators of Local 58's idea of analog horror so far. Besides their main channel, there are ancillary videos posted on other YouTube channels, and Save Walter White. Whoops, my bad, I meant to say findjackwalten.com, an interactive in-universe website with more links than words. The amount of effort here on display, from writing, directing, animating, and doing voiceovers for the series, is actually pretty impressive. Martin has a whole team working on the series along with him, and yeah, you can tell. The Walten Files kind of does a lot of the similar stuff that FNaF VHS series did, but I find the Walten Files much more enjoyable to watch. And by more enjoyable, I of course mean creepier. Probably because it isn't aping off a pre-established canon that got ruined by its own ramshackle development and the internet. Jesus Christ, the internet ruined Five Nights at Freddy's even more. There's an unnerving sense of mystery in every Walten Files video that feels appropriately jarring when juxtaposed with the kid-friendly cartoons and instructional videos they're inserted into, especially during the found footage segments where there's some prime uninviting dinge in their videos. The Walten Files have often been called one of the best analog horror series, and some of the creators of the horror series I will be discussing soon enough have also claimed Walten Files to be a big influence. And yeah, I like it a lot more than anything that came out of Five Nights at Freddy's. I never thought I'd be liking anything associated with that series, but hey, here we are. New episodes are set to be released pretty soon, at the time of me recording this, as the series is still ongoing, and from some of the plans that they have outlined, it looks like there will be even more episodes and more content to come, so some neat good news. And bunnies. Like I previously stated, this time period of analog horror is characterized by moving away from Local 58's formula and, wider genre experimentation. Now we get to experiment with tinfoil hats. Monument Mythos was started by ECKVA, who goes by the name Manticore here on YouTube, back in September of 2020, and the best way I can describe it is as an alternate history, conspiratorial, mockumentary analog horror series. That was a lot of adjectives, and yeah, it is a lot. The premise of the series is as follows. Certain major US national landmarks and other structures across the world are actually ravenous sentient beings called true forces of mass destruction. And yes, the US government knows about them for a better part of a past century. covering up the evidence of their existence and whatnot. We went off the fucking deep end already. Technically the series has no set protagonist, but we do get a decent selection of, characters involved in the story. A lot of them are actual historical figures, like James Dean, George Washington, John Rockefeller, and the living Statue of Freedom imbued with the soul of a murdered child that managed to kill 150 protesters with its impossibly sharp sword that can cut through anything. Yeah, I'm just gonna glide over that. During the course of the series, the plot expands with alternate timelines, caricatures of past and present events, interdimensional meta-structures that, devour blood forever, some slight political commentary, additional godlike and demonic beings, and an impending apocalypse that apparently had already happened. So it's like, imagine Book of Revelation rewritten by your average InfoWars truther on bath salts. That's Monument Mythos. Let it be known, I tried my best, guys. This is my 6th attempt at writing a coherent overview of the Monument Mythos. I'm not making that up. This shit is denser than fucking neutron stars. And just to illustrate my point, there are two comprehensive videos that Wendigoon made about the Monument Mythos, where he explains and theorizes about the plot of the series in some detail. And when you combine them, the videos are almost 6 hours in total length.
5 hours and 44 minutes.
5 hours and 44 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Babineau. There are just so many events and terms and characters, and some of the more bizarre happenings just didn't need further explanations. Now I understand how all of my friends feel when I try to explain 40K to them. And guys, I'm sorry, we do need to start 13.6 billion years ago. Lore aside, the series is, it's decently captivating for what it is, actually, because it has that certain, early YouTube charm, when back in, 2009, 2010, when you would just roam YouTube and found, random outrageous conspiracy theory video that had that fucking one track from Requiem from a Dream playing, and it was basically just a spooky PowerPoint presentation, except in this case, instead of some blurry images that are rather open to interpretation or something, this is showing something truly bizarre. And there is no Requiem for a Dream in the soundtrack this time around. So if you were getting tired of the constant, analog horror, public TV intrusions, and all those tropes, and want something that's more intricate and mind-fucked, there you go. The series officially ended in the early 2024, but in accordance with TMM's whole vibe of complicated vagueness, the actual season and episode count is kinda hard to pin down. A part of that is caused by the creator privating, deleting, remaking, and re-uploading videos due to various reasons. But also, Okay, you see, we've already talked about, other analog horror series, and some of them have supplementary stuff, like, files that you can download, media posts, their own custom websites, additional videos, other channels, whatever. The Monument Mythos has supplementary spin-offs. Bruh. So there are at least 3 seasons of TMM, but also there is Modern Day, which apparently is in a state of quantum superposition between being the show's 4th season, a prequel, a spin-off, and the series' finale. I can feel the aneurysm, guys. It's coming. It's coming. So we also have Corner Folk, which used to be its own thing, not tied to the Monument Mythos, but then it got absorbed into the prequel canon. And there's also one of the more recent ones was Alternate American Folklore, which is a spin-off series. You know, I think it's still ongoing. I don't know, dude. I don't have time to watch all this shit, and even if I did, I don't understand 95% of it. There's even some like other shit in the official playlist made by the author, so I have no fucking. It's overwhelming, guys. Like I said, denser than neutron stars. But oh god, yeah, I forgot to mention one of the original spin-off series for the Monument Mythos that came out after the second season, and it's called the Nixonverse. It's set in an alternate timeline to already alternate time. Fuck. And you know, Nixonverse is more like focused on strange, omnipotent creatures that act as heroes and villains for and against the U.S. government and other governments. So it's kind of like, it's like a weird cross-pollination between the Monument Mythos, Marvel, I guess, and Watchmen. I don't know. But if I remember correctly, Eve was actually unsatisfied with the series, and it was unlisted for a while. And Eve even claimed that Nixonverse was a bit too confusing, and I honestly, I don't even know how canon it is anymore. But I mean, how bad can it be, dude?
Tonight is the only one in our existence with true free will.
I see. Okay.
And Jesus increased
I'm
in wisdom,
feeling dizzy.
stature, and in favor with God.
There's blood
and
coming
man.
out of my nose. My head. Hey, you guys smell something burning?